Hello friends and welcome back to the channel. I'm Nick and this is MSFS Flight Plans. We are going to have at least two firsts for our channel tonight. The first is that this is going to be an almost entirely night flight, which is going to be really cool, and we're going to be flying at higher altitudes than usual. We're going to be flying from coast to coast, from east to west, over England, southern England, over London, leaving from Manston and arriving just south of Bristol. I'll show you how we're going to do that. But the second first is that we're going to do this entirely with ADF navigation. In that last flight, we're using VOR navigation, which wasn't too difficult. This takes things up to a slightly higher level than VOR flying, and I thought it would be pretty simple because once you understand the way they work, you would think it would be kind of simple. But after my first complete flight doing it, which was just the test flight for this, it's a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. So I'll tell you what we're going to do. We'll take a look at the map here in just a second. We're going to take the Stratoliner because it's awesome and vintage and does not have any modern avionics. Well, not much modern avionics, just enough to get us through this. So I'll show you all that stuff once we get in there. And everything seems to be working totally fine. I don't think they've made a 2024 compatible version of it yet. I don't know if I bought it in the marketplace or how I got it, but the only thing that doesn't seem to be working is if you switch the avionics to modern Garmin's, they'll turn on, but you can't get them to go off the startup screen. Other than that, everything seems to be working completely fine. So let me kind of show you how we're going to do this and explain how the ADFs and the NDBs work. And then after that last flight, when I was watching it, the VOR flight we took over Portugal, I was kind of wishing I would have referenced the map more as we were flying all that so you could kind of see what was happening in relation to the stuff we were using inside the cockpit. So we'll bring this over a little bit more for this trip. The big thing, and of course this will be linked, of course, in the video description if you want to fly yourself, along with the steps for the notes. So let me show you that too, what that looks like. Just like on that last flight, here's our steps for the notes. We probably won't really need that, but just in case you want to have that to track along, I'll put that down in the video description as well, because we'll just keep pulling this map over and look at everything we need to look at. But just so we can't cheat, one, it's going to be very dark out, so we can't see any landmarks on the ground. And once you get up in the air, I mean, you'll know that it's London once we're there, and we'll see the Thames kind of flowing through it. But once you get out here, it's kind of hard to tell which city's which. But we'll figure it out. So the big thing with ADF flying, you need to find a spot that has a lot of non-directional beacons, or NDBs, and these are old school. This was like Gen 1 before the VORs came out, and I was looking all over the world for a spot that had a pretty high density of them. But look at how many they have out here. They're everywhere. You just don't find this anywhere else in the world. And I was thinking about that, and I was like, why would there be so many out here? And then I was like, well, this was big-time technology in the 1930s and 40s, and you know they were flying tons and tons of planes out here because of World War II, so these are probably just vestiges of all that. But look how many there are. They're everywhere, which is really cool. So as you're setting up your flight plan, whether you're going to map out this one or do any other, you want to take note of a couple of different things as you're looking at the stations here. So the frequency for this will be right underneath the call letters for it. So this one will be November Foxtrot, and then 311 is what we'll dial in. There's one right here at the airport, which, by the way, you cannot select in the sim. This is closed now, so what I had to do is come way down here, and then I just started the plane down here on the ground, but you can't select that in the sim, which is kind of interesting. But obviously you can in a little nav map. So what we're going to do to catch this first one, just to back up a little bit, NDB flying or ADF flying is easy if they're all in front of you, because all it will do inside the cockpit is the arrow will just point at the tower. So if you're flying towards it, you just get the arrow pointing towards it directly straight ahead and just fly it, and you'll eventually hit the tower and then go over it. The problem arises when you're flying away from one, particularly if there's any kind of crosswind. So you can imagine, because all it's doing is pointing, you're not lining up on a radial like you're doing with VOR, where it'll just keep you tightly on that radial. I mean, you remember at the end of that last flight, we were like spot on the track the entire time. That's not going to be the case with this one. So when you're flying away from one, you might have the arrow pointing directly behind you, but you don't know if you're pointing this direction or that direction. As long as the nose and tail are lined up with this beacon, it'll look like it's directly behind you. So my initial thought was, well, I'll just fly right over it at a heading of 278, and as long as it's lined up directly behind me, I should be fine if I cross over at 278, but it wasn't fine. I wound up right about here before we caught the next signal. So we're just going to try our best to stay as close as we can. And the reason why, by the way, is if you have that crosswind coming. So imagine if you're flying this way, you got a strong crosswind coming from the south. It's going to push the tail this way and the nose this way. So it's going to look like the beacon is actually in a different spot in relation to the plane than it really is. So you could try to get it lined up, but if you're trying to correct for that, you'd have to point the nose more this way, which is going to bring you more in this direction, which is precisely what was happening. So we're going to fly off the airport here on a runway heading of 100, get out along the coast. I'll just be looking literally out the left side of the plane to see the coastline here. We're probably going to swing out a little bit because we'll be able to tell roughly at this open spot here where the station is, and of course the arrow will be pointing right at it. But we want to get far enough away that we can try to fly roughly at 278 over it. And then we'll be able to do a little bit of dead reckoning once we get up here, because we'll see the Thames flowing out here, and of course we'll see London and all that over there. But I want to show you some stuff about this island, so I don't want to be like too far this way. We'll figure that out once we get up there. The other thing you're going to want to pay attention to is the range for these, and there's quite a bit of variance, unlike the VORs. This one right along the coast, if you hover over it, you can see down at the bottom is 75 nautical miles. That's the farthest I've ever seen, and I bet it's probably because it's right down here along the coast. And you can see right on the other side of the coast, a whole bunch more. So I bet that's what they were using to get back and forth back in the day. Once we get to this one, this only has a range of 23, I believe. Yeah, 23, so that's really short. We won't be able to pick that up when we leave. And again, once we can pick up the one we're flying towards, it's super easy. You just point the arrow towards it and go. But from here, we're not going to get till about, let's measure that real quick. I think it's going to be just south of Southend-on-Sea before we can get to that. So 23, yeah, there's 23 right there. So we'll be looking out the right side of the plane. Once we see all the lights from Southend-on-Sea, then we'll start trying to tune this one in. Once we do, we'll just adjust our heading to fly directly over that, which you can see just happens to be at London City Airport. And then from there, we only got 23 miles, so this signal would carry us over here, but again, I don't want to rely on anything behind us because you'll get some variance with that. So as soon as we cross over that one, I'll dial in our heading of 287 and immediately tune to this one so we can fly directly at it. But we got another problem here. The range for this next one is 38 nautical miles. You see it right there at the bottom? So that's not going to stretch for the 56. So once again, just like on that first one, we're going to try to hold this heading of 263. And then our cue for this one will be looking out the right side of the plane for Oxford. There's some airports you might think you'd be able to see the lights for them, but none of these are lighted. The only ones that are lighted will be almost right underneath us and on the other side of Oxford. Fortunately, you'll be able to make out Oxford versus all the other cities because you'll be able to see this big loop going around it. So once we get directly south of that, so right off of our right wing, then we'll know we can probably tune into this one. And right from there, once we get to this one, we will start our descent. We'll be cruising at 10,000 feet, which this baby could do a lot more than that since it was one of the first pressurized passenger planes in the world. But we'll do 10,000 feet just so we don't have to go up and come right back down. This is tricky right here. Really tricky. And I really screwed it up on my test flight, and I'm not really sure what the solution for it is. So we can try to fly. Again, it's going to be behind us initially. We do have another NDB right here at the airport, which will tune in. So my thought was, if I'm flying a heading from this one of 246, you can see right there, and I dial in or tune in this frequency right when we leave here, but keep our arrow pointed directly ahead from this one, or even if it's pointing directly at that one, as soon as the heading for this one is 20 degrees off of our center, because we're going to be going from 246 to 266, I figured that would be our signal to take that turn. It didn't work out. I wound up flying just directly at the thing, so I think we'll probably just have to use some dead reckoning once we get out there, which is a little tricky because the lights of Bath really start to blend in with Bristol. But once we get about right here, we'll be able to see the runway lights for this one because this is the main airport out here. So once we get out here, we'll be pretty low. We'll just kind of look for it, and if we're off, we'll adjust. But that's how we're going to do it. And we'll bring this map over a lot more than we did on the last flight so we can see what's going on with all that. But let's get in and fire this baby up because there are no lights at this airport, and it's about to get really dark out here. Okay, park that over there. I really love this plane. I love all vintage planes, but a vintage liner? Yes, please. Okay, so let's jump over. So in here, since we're going to have to be looking outside of the plane and sometimes underneath it, you can see we can't get a good view from over there because we're a little bit far away from that sidewall. So I put a couple other cameras in here. Look at that one. And same thing on the other side because we're going to need to be looking out of both sides. I put a camera back here, which we won't need in flight. And by the way, if you get in here and none of your engines are starting up, just cycle through the ground power and then back up to battery power. I found that's what I had to do to get it working properly. So let's come over here and we'll go up there to get her started up. And you know what? Let's go ahead and hop outside and set up a nice external camera because we're going to see some... What the heck is that? Those are some interesting shadows. Those should probably disappear because they weren't there a minute ago, but when you get outside the plane, you got to reset this camera. So let's zoom in a little bit because this is going to look awesome. That might be a tree shadow or something. That's wild. All right, so let's start with all of our lights. No smoking. It should be definitely smoking for 1940s. We'll have them put their seatbelts on, the panel lights. There we go. Those are on. And I'm just going to put a little bit of lighting right up here at this top one because if you turn the other lights on, it gets too bright and it's not a beautiful ambiance at night. Okay, get our beacon on. We'll leave the cabin lights off. Our compass light, I don't know what that does because you can see the compass lights are already on, but we'll turn it on anyway. Position lights. We'll come back and turn the generators on. We don't need to mess with those. So the steps for starting this bad boy up. And by the way, if you want to turn on your little fuel truck and some stairs outside, you can click these over here. It's fantastic. So for these engines up here, we're going to go boost, prime, start, mag. That'll be the sequence for all of them. So we'll start with engine 1. Boost, prime. You're supposed to wait 5 seconds, but you don't have to. It'll still start up, so we'll save a few seconds. Got a good start. Engine number 3, boost, prime, start. All right, 2 good starts. Number 2, boost, prime, start. And just in case you can't hear it start up, and look at this, man, you can open the windows. The sound doesn't change. Total bummer. And finally, engine number 4. I wish that would stop popping up. Boost, prime, start, mags, rock and roll. Now we can turn the generators on. We'll go ahead and get our landing lights on. And jump back over to the pilot's seat. Avionics on. So, we will be flying with some heading holds. This is about as modern as the avionic gets, which is kind of nice because once the lights dim, there are no cabin lights that will light up our little Sperry here, so that at night is pretty much non-functional because you can't see anything down there at all. So we'll be using this for our altitude. I'm going to go ahead and set that now, so 10,000 feet will be our target, which is going to be just perfect for nighttime light sightseeing. That's set. Check our altimeter. That's good to go. That looks about right. And I'm going to go ahead and set our initial heading hold for 100. I'm doing this on my external hardware, by the way, if you're wondering what I'm talking about as I'm doing this. So that's set to 100. And now we need to tune in that first frequency for that NDB. So let's bring our map back over. 311. And I don't know how the heck the pilot's able to... Well, they did have a radio guy sitting right behind them, but wait till you see where the radio is for this thing. Look at that. So let's set that for ADF. And... Oh, let's not go that way. My brakes are twitching because I do have that mapping problem, which I still cannot resolve. Alright, so that should be good. We probably won't see it until we get up in the air, which is not a problem. Okay, so when it's just neutral, when it's pointing directly east like that, that means that it hadn't picked it up yet. You'll see it once we get up in the air. It'll start probably pointing off to the side, because that's where the station will be. It'll be pointing west, even though that'll actually be north. Okay, let's give her 1 notch of flaps. And we already got the landing lights on. Let me look down here and turn off the parking brake to stop all that twitching. And let's roll her out. The sun should be setting once we get turned around the other direction. And I think the time that we're flying will get us just a little bit of sunset glow for the duration of the flight, which will be kind of helpful because we'll still be able to see some of the stuff on the ground just a little bit. But it should get fairly dark by the time we get out there by Bristol. This baby handles like a dream on the ground. Takeoffs, landings are pretty easy. I never lock the tail wheel because I find it's a lot more difficult to control. I got a little bit of a wobble on my last landing, but I managed to keep it on the runway somehow. So we'll just leave that unlocked. But you don't have to touch that yoke. It'll bring itself up by itself. No problem. Okay, 1 more final check. We got 1 notch of flaps in. Our generator's on. That's important. Landing lights are on. We got our altitude set for 10,000. I got it ready to hold the vertical speed once we get up. Brake is obviously off. I think everything's good. Let's rock and roll. Here we go. We'll have to pull the power back and the mix back a little bit since we will be getting up there pretty good. Just get up on the center line there. Tail comes up, nice and easy. Beautiful. And bring her on up. Lovely. Just lovely. All right, let's trim her down a little bit. That's going to be a pretty hard climb. Trim her down some, gears up, and flaps up. All right, we have picked up the NDB. You can see right over there. So now let's do a vertical speed hold. Autopilot on, heading hold, vertical speed. We'll climb at, let's just do 1,000 feet a minute because we're not in a super rush here. So I'll just be steering initially by adjusting our heading. We're going to fly out off the coast a little bit. I'll show you roughly where that NDB tower should be. And we're going to try to come right over the top of that. And our initial heading after we cross over that needs to be 278. All right, just help me remember that. This is going to be beautiful. So London is obviously all photogrammetry. We took a tour out there not too long ago in one of those little ultralights. This does not appear to be, but it still looks pretty good. Look at that big train station down there. This might be, actually. But despite that, maybe because of our altitude over London, really, really great performance. Of course, there's no glass in this thing either, which might have something to do with all that. So I think our station is going to be right around this spot right here. So let's just kind of come out a little bit. I'm going to pull off to the right and just kind of circle around so we can get a little distance between us to come back over that. And just keep an eye on this thing. It's just going to always point directly at the signal. So if you were using VOR in this, you can also track that way. This thing would move back and forth just like the other planes with the radials, but you won't get the little like deflection line that kind of shows you. This functions in the same way. And I'm guessing this horizontal line is probably for glide slope if you're trying to do an ILS landing. I've never tried that in this. I don't think I have. Maybe in 2020 I did. All right, we crossed over 2,000 feet. Once we get over 3,000, I'll pull that mix back a little bit. We can probably power down some. And once we get up to 10,000, we'll be able to take the power all the way back up, and we'll still be fine with the manifold pressure, but we do need to pull our RPMs back just a shim there. Airspeed's looking good. Okay, so let's start coming back over. And we'll slowly turn it, and I'm just going to be looking for that spot on the ground and see if we can fly right over it, and kind of glancing up at our arrow there for where the NDB should be. Need to get sight of the land again. Again, little nav map's doing me no good because my airplane icon isn't on there, so we're totally flying by airwaves here. All right, we need to come over pretty good. That little light spot right there in the corner should be where our beacon is. All right, so this is a heading of 360 now. We're flying directly north. And then we'll try to finesse this over that spot. I'm thinking, I took a nice close-up look at the map. It appears to be like right there. So let's start cutting over that, because this beast is slow moving, slow turning anyway. Oh yeah, this is going to be gorgeous. Just a beautiful, beautiful flight. Don't get to do this kind of stuff very often. All right, cut it right over. And if I can just keep sight of it in that window there, we're not going to come right over at 278, but we'll be pretty close. And then once we're over it, you'll see that little arrow up there flip around behind us. We'll try to come right over that if we can. We're at 290 right now, heading towards 290, heading towards a heading of 290. Oh, that is beautiful. Love it, love it, love it. All right, 278. We'll just see how we're doing here. So again, even though that arrow may show directly behind us once we get over it, and it may not, that doesn't necessarily mean we're flying a heading of 278 when you're flying with NDBs. So we're right next to it right now, and it's about to come back behind us. And since it's moving kind of slow, if you're like directly over it, it'll just almost like flip in a matter of seconds. So we probably went a little bit to the north of it. But I'm looking at the mouth of the Thames there, and I feel pretty good about where we're at right now. I might come over just a little bit more. Just trying to eyeball it at this point. Okay, bring our mix back to about halfway. I don't have an exhaust gauge temperature, so I'm just going to bring it to halfway. That usually works for most planes. We can bring that manifold pressure up a little bit now. RPMs we shouldn't have to adjust again. And we'll go ahead and turn the landing lights off. Everything's looking good. So that was Manson Airport we just departed from, and it was built shortly after the start of World War I to train pilots in Handley Page Type O bombers, which are about as vintage as it gets. The plane was one of the largest in the world when it was first introduced, and with its two 360 horsepower Rolls-Royce engines could get up to a blistering cruise speed of around 70 knots. But despite that meandering pace, there's a runway right down there. You see it? It had a range of 700 miles, which was plenty far enough to get back and forth to the bombing sites over in Europe during World War I. And you can imagine how great that spot was for an airfield during World War II, being right along the coast like this. About as close as you could get to the action from the British mainland, maybe a little bit further south, and I'm sure they had more airfields down there too. And that fact did not escape the notice of Hermann Goering, who sent his Luftwaffe over for as many visits as he could manage to bomb the crap out of that place, and all the other airfields out here. But during the war, they expanded the width of that runway we left from to create 3 lanes side by side with no space in between them, which made it great for landing high volumes of damaged planes coming back from combat missions. In fact, they received so many that the place became a big junkyard of old planes that were too damaged to fly, so they just set them aside to use for parts. Okay, we got a little bit of deflection off of it, but that's probably about right, accounting for how the plane's having to crab into the wind a little bit to maintain our heading hold. So I like the direction we're flying, right up into the guts of the Thames there, so I think we're in pretty good shape here. During the Cold War, the U.S. Air Force started using that field as a strategic air command base for fighter bomber units. But they wound up pulling out in 1960, and it became a joint use facility for civilian cargo flights and air cadet training. Then in 1989, it became Kent International Airport, which was servicing a handful of regional routes and charter flights, but they eventually shut it down in 2014 because they could not build it any bigger way out here. And it was starting to bleed money. So for a while, I saw some pictures of it. They were using it as a huge parking lot for semis, or lorries, for all you Brits. When disruptions like snarls at the channel or COVID restrictions were starting to back everything up, I guess they did that so people wouldn't start parking all over the local roads. But now they're talking about maybe opening it back up for flights in 2028. So we'll see. They do have a little aviation museum down there, though, so it's worth a trip, probably, if you're in the area. All right, coming across 6,000 feet, everything's looking good. We can give it a little bit more power. And once we get to 10,000, we can give it full power and we'll be in good shape. Yeah, we're lining up on this pretty well. So in just a minute, right up here, this little island we're going to fly past on the right is the Isle of Sheppy. Sorry, that's on our left, not our right. Known by some as Hellhole Island. Apparently locals, I saw a YouTube video of some local guys checking it out, trying to figure out why they call it Hellhole Island. And it looks like it's pretty rough down there on the ground. I'm sure some of you guys that live around here might know even better than me or those guys did. I don't think they were from the area. So maybe not a must-see destination if you're traveling through the area. One thing that may add to that delightful ambiance is a partially submerged wreck of a ship called the Richard Montgomery, laying just off the coast on this side of the island, over on the other side of it. So you can still see the top of it sticking out there, but that thing was a Liberty ship that arrived in 1944 and then ran aground while trying to anchor in an area that was just a tad too shallow. And you know what? At the end, we'll look at the satellite map, see if we can take a look at that thing, see if it shows up on there. But what's particularly interesting about the old Dick Monty is that it is still filled with 1,400 tons of explosives, making it a bit of a public safety risk. I think they're trying to figure out what the heck to do with it. All right, I think I want to come over to the right just a little bit here. And then we'll start, once we get up into the mouth of it, we'll start looking for Southend on Sea, and once we get directly south of that, then we'll switch to the other frequency. So they do have some shipping and aviation history at Old Sheppy down there. The Sheerness Dockyard, which is all the way on that western tip of it, was established in the 1600s as a Royal Navy base, used to repair damaged warships, and they built quite a few new ones too. They launched the first one in 1677 and went on to build 100 more before they started to mothball the place 225 years later. So this is where the dockyards would be. And there's even a little fort that you can still see right down there, but it looks like it's in really bad shape. I'll show it to you at the end. It's surrounded by like junkyards and stuff. And I think the Richard Monty, I could tell the guys were standing right about here, so it's probably somewhere right around here. We'll see if we can find it at the end. Boy, they don't have too many lights on yet. Maybe the sun's just not down far enough to see them all. They did have some lights down by the coast there when we took off. But we'll see plenty of lights once we get going. Over in London in particular. But Sheppy is also considered the birthplace of British aviation, starting with a ballooning club at the turn of the 20th century. Then in 1909, the Short brothers, yes, those Short brothers, opened Shell Beach Aerodrome to accommodate their 6 Wright Flyers, which were far more popular in Europe than the States initially. Just a year prior, those guys set up shop in London, becoming the first company in the world to produce aircraft at scale. And you've probably flown some of the Shorts here in the sim. Very boxy looking. And you can imagine what was going on down there during World War II. In fact, in 2015, they opened a little aviation museum down here, too, that was dedicated to the military pilots of both of the World Wars. So I imagine any second now the lights will be coming on. I must have taken off a few minutes earlier than I did last time because you could definitely see the lights of Rochester down in here. That's where you would find that city, which has a few landmarks that bear mentioning. One of them is their big cathedral, which was founded in 604 AD, making it the second oldest in England after Canterbury. But the building they have down there wasn't completed until 1238, which is about 50 years younger than that monstrosity at Canterbury. And I've actually got a client that was baptized at Canterbury Cathedral. How cool is that? She said you have to be, I don't know if she said you had to be born in the town or still have relatives in the town, but you can't just walk in there and get baptized, which I thought was pretty neat. Visitors can also enjoy Rochester Castle, which is only about 100 years older than the cathedral and contains one of the best preserved Norman keeps in the country, which of course we can't see from up here either. And also some ties to Charles Dickens in Rochester, who lived in and around the area for a while, even mentioning the town in 2 of his books. Okay, so let's hop over to the right side real quick and just see how we're tracking, see if we can see Southend-on-Sea. So it's going to be right up in this area. We're probably not close enough yet to pick up that next signal. But I like the heading that we're on. Look at that. That is gorgeous. That looked like a hellhole to me, but we're not down there on the ground. So I set the winds. This is not the live weather. I gave us as close as I could get to a tailwind of about 25 knots, just to speed us along and keep from having too much deflection when the NDBs are behind us. That is beautiful. Really nice. I just wish it was a little darker, but that's okay. It'll be much darker by the time we get to where we're going. Well, look at that. We are spot on. What that means when it's behind us, I don't know. We'll find out at the end when we turn on our tail. Okay, let's take one more look out here and see how close we're getting to SOS. I'm going to go ahead and dial that frequency in. Look at that. That looks so good. Come on, lights, come on. Okay, so our next channel is going to be, the frequency is 322. So we're probably right about here right now, I would guess. So 322, that means we're about 25 miles probably from that. So we'll go ahead and dial her into 322 and see if we're picking her up yet. If not, it'll be pretty soon. This will be easy. 322. Nope, can't see it yet, but it'll come in just a minute. And if we have any kind of deflection off that, we're just going to get it pointing right in front of us, and that'll take us directly over the top of the thing. So I've got a little history for you guys about the Thames that we didn't have time to cover when we did our dedicated London tour. 50 million years ago, there was no river down here at all, because this would have all been at the bottom of a shallow sea. Then around 3 million years ago, a proto-Thames formed that ran from what we now call Wales over to the North Sea, but it was a little bit further north than where the river is today. And as the ice sheets came and went through the cycles of freezing and thawing, the river got pushed further to the south, eventually getting blocked entirely and creating a diversion that would become the modern Thames Valley. And then finally, at the end of the last ice age, I think that's Rochester right down there. At the end of the last ice age is when we finally got the Thames in roughly the spot that it's at now, which would have been about 10,000 years ago. And I was surprised to discover the ice didn't actually come all the way down here during the last ice age. And the reason I was surprised is because I used to live in Connecticut, and I know that's where the glaciers stopped in North America, but that's about 600 miles south of here. And they also went all the way down to the Alps over mainland Europe. So I don't know why they didn't go as far south here. I thought it might have something to do with ocean currents, but if the Gulf Stream was still the Gulf Stream back then, it would have been way warmer over by Connecticut. Okay, we got the signal directly in front of us, so we're in good shape. And pretty soon we'll probably be able to see London City Airport before we fly right over it. How's everything looking? We'll go ahead and go up to full power. RPMs are looking good. Our mix is probably in pretty good shape. Don't really have any way of knowing at this point. Let's look out the windows real quick while we're here. Love it, love it, love it. Oh, man. Only thing we're missing is lights. Doggone it. I mean, it was a difference of probably 5 minutes when I started the time. But 5 minutes is a lot of time, I guess, when you're waiting for lights to come on. But if we were really flying over London in 1940, particularly from September to May of the next year, we would not see any city lights at all. That was the time of the dreaded Blitz. To make it harder for German pilots to navigate, all the street lights would have been turned off and all the windows covered, so the only thing you probably would see are searchlights off in the distance and surrounding the city. And I'm kind of wondering, I mean, because they wouldn't want them to navigate by searchlights either. I'm wondering if they would move them around occasionally, because if they were in the same spot every night, they could just navigate by where the searchlight positions were. Okay, I think this is probably going to be London City. It's pretty close to downtown. That might be it right up there. We'll see as we get closer. We'll see the runway lights. Man, what if we're actually flying fast enough that we're just tracking the sun over the horizon and we never get to see any lights? That's fine. We'll make it easier to spot some landmarks. Although it's going to be very hard to see Oxford because we need to see those lights surrounding the city. We'll figure it out. According to a recent documentary I watched about Winston Churchill, I wish I could remember what it was called because it was so good. They said that the Blitz might not have happened if not for an accidental bombing run on London that was carried out by Luftwaffe pilots who thought they were somewhere else. But the very next night, Churchill, being Churchill, bombed Berlin at night, and the tit-for-tat was officially on. But some other historians believe that Hitler probably would have started bombing the cities anyway just to break the morale of the people, which, as we all know, did not have the intended effect. But by the time the dust settled, it is believed that more than 18,000 tons of bombs fell on London alone, killing as many as 30,000 people and leveling over 1 million homes and buildings. Pretty rough. Got used to tube life for a while. Yep, that's got to be the airport right there, I think. You can see the runway. And that's where our next NDB will be. But even after the Blitz, Londoners still had to keep their eyes and ears on the skies. Starting in June of 1944, the V-1 buzz bombs started appearing, with over 2,300 of those striking the city. And another 500 V-2s fell by the time the war had ended. Pretty rough. Let's look at our windows again. I just can't stop. You know what? Let's hop outside the plane. Oh my gosh. That is so awesome. I need to try to get a thumbnail like that because that looks so cool. Alright, we can see some of the lights coming on. It's just not dark enough yet for them to look super bright. Alright. Does this do anything? Not much, but at least it moves. Yep, there's London City Airport right there. That happened in 1987, and if I'm recalling correctly from our notes from our last tour of London a few months ago, the idea behind that place was to make it a little easier for the bigwigs to get downtown, taking their private jets in, all the business folk. It's only about 6 miles from downtown, whereas Heathrow is about twice as far, and then of course you'd have to deal with all the travelers and stuff at Heathrow. But it's not very big at all. I'm sure anybody that's simming regularly knows, and you've probably flown in there. Runway's less than 5,000 feet, I think. And if you're coming from the other direction, it requires a very steep approach because there's some buildings right at the other end of that. It's really fun, though, to try to bring it in there. I'm sure some of you guys have probably tried to put your 737s down there. I don't think they've brought 737s in. I think the 146 is a pretty regular visitor at that place. And, of course, all the business class jets, the Embraers. I think I even read, and I may have mentioned that flight, that you have to get a special certification to land down there, which is pretty crazy. Okay, so let's bring our map back over and check out what our next heading is going to be once we cross over this. So we're probably about right here right now, and then we're going to go to 287. Once we see that needle flip back behind us, I think we're going to fly directly over it, which is going to be great. So we'll get on 287 just so we're pointing in roughly the right direction, then we'll immediately tune to 277 because we should be able to pick that signal up from here. So 287 for the heading, 277 for our frequency. Sounds good. Let's look around a little bit. Gotta keep clicking over here to do it. Yeah, a little bit of stuttering now, but we're over all that photogrammetry. Oh, this is nice. Alright, so we'll be able to see quite a few of the sights down here because we have a little bit of that twilight glow. But let's just get over to the airport and get ourselves situated, and then we'll start looking for some stuff on the ground there. Okay, just keeping an eye on this needle. Oh, we got a VOR station, look. It's picking up something from somewhere. And man, there's probably as many VORs out here as there are NDBs. They're all over the place. Kind of makes you wonder why there were so many, because those things have enough range that... I mean, I'm just looking at the map now. Just around London, there's 5 of them, 6 of them. VOR stations. That's a lot. Just watching our needle there. So while we're needle watching, I just saw a post that wasn't a video post, but Island Sim Pilot just put up something in his community page saying there was some kind of problem, some kind of glitch with the beta version of the last sim update. I think he posted it a couple days ago. And he said it was causing a crash to desktop of the sim and then erasing the sim from your computer and resetting everything because it was like completely gone. Which I thought, well, that sounds terrible, but then I was like, that would be kind of nice if it... Okay, that thing's moving, flip. All right, we were right over it. Great. So 287. I think we probably caught that pretty close. And let's get to that new frequency of 277. And we should see that immediately. 277. Got it. Right in front of us. Perfect. Very good. Okay, let's look out the window here. So anyway, I didn't experience that because I'm not using the beta, but I have often had fantasies about just resetting everything because I'm starting to get so many problems. Okay, so down here we got London Bridge, and then there's the tower right there. And the Shard would probably be right about there. This is downtown London. All the big buildings are right underneath us right now. We can't really see them. And then over here we would have Buckingham Palace is right there. And then Kensington Palace is right over here. And Regent's Park is this right here, which is where the zoo was. And let's see if we can see the eye. There's the eye, so there's the big Ferris wheel right there. This is great. All right, we can see just enough that we can still see everything. Very nice. Big train station. I don't remember which one that is. Well, you can almost see the palace down there. Look at that. And there's Kensington right over there. U.S. Embassy is over here somewhere. Parliament, Big Ben would be down here. All right, this is working out pretty well. Because if it's too dark, you can't see. For some reason, the wheel wasn't lit up at night. If there was a little bit of sky glow, you could still see it. That just looks fantastic. Perfect. All right, let's see how we're tracking. Now we're getting a little further away. Looking good. Let me look right at it so I can make sure we're pointing right at it. All right, so I'm going to come over a couple degrees. Just trying to get lined up right at it. So right over here, that of course is Heathrow. There we go, looks about right. Busiest airport in the UK. Number 5 in the world by passenger volume, behind Atlanta, the big one at Dubai, Dallas, and Tokyo. They started landing planes out there in 1930, using it heavily during World War II, of course. And they've pretty much been expanding it ever since. There's currently 2 runways, both over 12,000 feet long, so you can put whatever you want down over there. And Wikipedia said they're about to build a 3rd one. I couldn't see any evidence of that on the satellite maps, but then I read in another article that they're thinking about, they've been talking about it apparently for a while. I think they're going to start actually doing it, at least according to where the plans are right now in 2028. But I don't know where they're going to put it. They can't put it between them because that's where all the terminals are. And it looks like there's structures and hangars and stuff all on the side in the little neighborhood, so I don't know what's up with all that. I'm sure they're going to figure it out. But since that is so close to the city here, they use a couple of different techniques to keep the noise complaints to a minimum. One of them is requiring continuous descent approaches at night to the extent it's possible. So that way nobody has to level out. They can just keep the engines powered down and descend all the way through the pattern. And the other thing they do is have everyone take off to the west, which is the direction we're heading right now, so that the roar of the full throttle engines will be over the fields on the other side there. And I'm sure the Royals love that because Windsor Castle is 4 miles away from the end of the runway. So Windsor is probably like right here. So they're probably getting the full brunt of that noise, but they probably deserve a little bit of that. And this little strip, is that it right there? Man, without the runway lights, it's kind of hard to tell. I think this is it. Yeah, that's it. That looks like a runway. That is RAF Northolt. That opened in 1915, making it the oldest RAF field still in operation. And its squadron of Spitfires and Hurricanes played a major role in defending the skies over London during the Battle of Britain in 1940. And I read they were Polish flyers out there, which is pretty cool. But today that's home to the number 32 Royal Squadron, which is used to cart the crowns around. All right, let's just kind of stay ahead of ourselves a little bit here. Take another look at the map. So if that's where Heathrow is, we're probably about right here, and we're flying towards 277, so we'll need to start keeping an eye on that. Once that flips over, we're going to switch to 263. 263. We can come back to that if we need to. So speaking of Windsor, it occurred to me that I didn't know what the last name of Charles and the boys actually was, so I had to look into that. I'm sure some of you Brits probably know, but I certainly didn't. I figured it was just Windsor, but it's not. And even Windsor has quite a bit of baggage attached to it. So let's see, the palace is probably... I mean, it's close. Maybe here? It's right off the end of that runway right there. Unlike the way most of us do it with surnames here in the U.S., and even probably the average Brit, the Royals have historically adopted the name of the house from which the bloodline descended. So we all recognize some of the more prominent examples like the Yorkists, Lancastrians, and Tudors, of course. Good old Henry VIII. Well, things got a little tricky when Queen Victoria married Albert. Albert was from Germany, and he came from the house of Saxe-Coburg-Gotha in Germany. And when his grandson, George V, became king, he started feeling the sting of a lot of anti-German sentiment during World War I, so he switched the royal house name to Windsor, which was literally named after the house. But it doesn't end there. Once Queen Elizabeth married Philip, They added his surname to the mix. So now we arrive at King Charles of the House of Windsor with the official surname of Mountbatten Windsor, if I'm saying that correctly. Good luck keeping track of all that. All right, just watching that ADF arrow up there, because we're probably getting close to that flipping over. Let me check that new heading we're going to fly real quick. 263. We got to be getting close. Yeah, that's 263. Okay. Let's hop outside the plane real quick, see how we're looking. Absolutely gorgeous. I wish there was like a wing light or something. That would be awesome. But that still looks just beautiful. I think we're just chasing the sun here, guys. I don't know if we're going to get full-on city lights, which is going to be fine until we try to find that runway. All right, it's flipping over, so switch to I've already forgotten it again. 260 something. Oh gosh, I got to look. It was 263. All right. We're still turning, so we're probably good. We're moving. So now we're going to get about halfway to the next beacon, and then we're going to look for Oxford off to our right, and there might be enough streetlights down there to be able to spot it. But let's take a little look outside of that plane on the other side. There's about 5 airports out here. None of them have lights except for one we're going to fly almost directly over. Yeah, this is going to be tough, but I mean, I guess we could just say in 10 minutes we'll look for that other beacon because we're not going to change the heading at this point anyway. And we also flew over Wembley Stadium, but I think we were too close to it to be able to see it out the side. Yep, I don't know how we're really tracking. We're on 263, and we're probably pretty close to it. It looks like we're a little bit off from our beacon, but that's fine. If we undershoot a little bit, we'll get close. The big thing is just being able to identify Oxford. So I've got some exciting news. I got an email from Clifford last week, yes, of Clifford Designs, and he said, Nick, you're not going to believe this. I got another Norway pack ready if you want to check it out. And I said, of course I want to check it out, man. The problem is I don't want to look like we're in cahoots with each other, man. I can't make like every 4th video a review for Clifford stuff, which I definitely want to do. And he said, no, man, don't worry about that. He's like, you've been a big help. I don't mind sending it over to you. So I was like, yeah, man, I'll absolutely check it out. And then he said, if you want to do a giveaway, by the way, I'll give you a free version that you can offer up to someone. And I was like, well, yeah, man, that's awesome. I really appreciate that. So I think what we'll do, because it'll give me an excuse to fly it for our next flight, we'll do it a giveaway. And I need to think of a cool way to do that. I thought about maybe some kind of trivia, but in this day and age, trivia is not difficult anymore because you can find the answer to anything on your phone. So if anyone has some cool ideas of something that we can do for the giveaway for that, let me know. I haven't even checked it out yet. All I know is it's in Norway somewhere. And I bet there's a lot of waterfalls. I just got to keep looking out the side of the plane to see if we can spot Oxford, because that's going to be our cue. It's probably right up over here, I would bet. I didn't look at the... Oh, heck, let's look at the map, see if we can identify what those... We'd have a real map if we were really flying this in real life. That looks like water over there. There's a river. Okay, that river looks like it's running right through Oxford. Okay, so that'll be cool. Once we get over that river, which has got to be this thing right here, I'm guessing. Looks like a pretty prominent river. Okay, yeah, it kind of winds underneath us here. So once we get directly over it, we'll be still a little bit east of Oxford, so we'll come a little bit past that, but you can tell where it gets all janky up there. That does appear to be in Oxford, and you can see some of those lakes and stuff up there, so we'll call that Oxford, and then we'll switch our frequency over. So our next flight will be another Clifford flight, and I haven't been in a helicopter in, gosh, at least 2 flights, so you know I'm jonesing for that. Just beautiful. Just beautiful. All right, click back over here. Oh, we have a little chronometer over there. I didn't notice that. Do we have one on the other side? No, we don't. All right, everything's looking good with our gauges. Still got full power. RPMs are looking good. Don't know what our ground speed is because our little plane icon is turned off. So let's go ahead and... We're probably at that other frequency by now because it's got a more powerful beam than that last one, so let's check that out. We'll go ahead and dial it in so at least we can get pointed in the right direction for that one. And that one's going to be on the side of Swindon, and then I'll tell you some interesting stuff about Oxford. So that one's going to be 282. 282. We'll go ahead and tune her in. Tune into 282. Yep, there we go. And we'll come down there, and let's see if we're getting it yet. Not yet, but we will be. So most of us probably recognize Oxford as the home of the oldest university in the English-speaking world. That was founded in 1096. But what a lot of people might not know, but I do because I watch Time Team, is that it's also the home to Oxford Castle, and that was built by the Normans in 1071. And that served as a prison for nearly 1,000 years. I think 900 years it was a prison. And as if that's not reason enough to visit the area, it's also home to the Ashmolean, which became the world's first public museum when it opened in 1683. I watched a little video tour of that place, which was pretty neat. Not the best museum I've ever seen, but if it's the first public museum, probably worth a visit. All right, come on, Needle. Point on up there. Looks like we lost all of our VORs, at least whatever we're tuned at. There it is. Bam. And we're heading right at it. Great. Love it. Probably need to turn into that just a little bit. So we'll banker just a hair. Check the barometer, though we probably don't need to because this is not the live weather. So, well, we might be able to see it because there's enough light. Let me hop over this side of the plane and see it. See if we can see it when we fly by. It's going to be really tough. Oh, that's the radio station. Where are you? Must be in the bathroom. There's a landmark out here which we did see on one of our very first flights over England, which has now been made unlisted because the narration was so terrible. We'll eventually get back out there, I'm sure. But there's something called the Uffington White Horse. And I'll show you exactly where that is on the satellite map because you can see it in the sim. But that's about 13 miles to the southwest of Oxford. And it's worth checking out. I'll show you how you have to look at it. It's kind of tricky because it's on the other side of a hill, but we'll check it out at the end. But that thing is believed to be a nearly 400-foot-long stylized rendition of either a horse or a dragon carved through the turf and into the underlying limestone more than 3,000 years ago. And yeah, it would be way too tough to spot from here. I think it's a little bit too far off. I wouldn't even know where to look. But I'll show you where it is. Yeah, check it out. It's pretty neat. Let's get back over here to our pilot seat. Everything's looking good. But since that horse, or dragon, or whatever it is, predates any kind of written records out here, nobody's sure precisely what it is supposed to represent, although I think it looks a lot like a horse. And they don't know who made it or why, but it's definitely a cool landmark. Not as cool as the Cernabas giant, but still pretty cool. And I won't spoil that surprise if you've never seen the giant, but you should check that out too. You can see him in the sim. And by the way, that's spelled C-E-R-N-E-A-B-B-A-S. Cernabas. Check it out. And start laughing. Some of you are probably already laughing. Okay, so in just a minute we're going to fly directly over Swindon, and we would see the lights if there were more lights to see. With a 2021 population of just north of 183,000, it is considered the largest settlement in the country, and I'm not really sure what that means, because we don't have settlements here in the U.S. So I don't know what the difference between a village, hamlet, settlement, city, I don't know what the difference is, so maybe one of you locals can fill us in. But that was just a little market town for most of its history until the Great Western Railway arrived in 1843, turning it into what would become one of the largest train-related industrial complexes in the world for a while. And you better believe they got a cool train museum down there. It's called the Steam Museum, which is in all capital letters, so it's probably an acronym for something. All right, I'm thinking this is probably going to be it here because that looks like the biggest clump of lights. And then once we get right over that, that's where we're going to turn on our final heading for our descent. And then we're going to have to try to start looking for, worst case scenario, we'll fly over Bristol, which hopefully we'll be able to identify, and then land coming from the other direction. And then just look for the runway out of the left side of the plane. Because the important thing is not precision, but just making it, and making it alive. But based on what I was reading about Swindon, it sounds like it's a lot like cities in the U.S. If you've ever been to them, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Pigeon Forge is one, Niagara Falls, right here by me in Jacksonville, St. Augustine, same thing. Not quite close enough to any major cities to be a true tourist haven. And even though St. Augustine's only about 30 miles from Jacksonville, there's no reason to come to Jacksonville if you're a tourist, so you can just skip that and go right to St. Augustine. But all those little towns, they do have some attractions, but they're kind of like low-rent attractions. It's not like going to Orlando or Miami or Las Vegas or something like that. And the one thing all of those towns will have is a big outlet center, and they have one of those here in Swindon too. But the cool thing about this one is they built it in one of the old industrial buildings for the trains, which is probably pretty neat. I couldn't find any pictures of it, but I bet it's pretty cool. So if you need some knockoff cologne, or an Izod t-shirt maybe, perhaps a new pair of Levi's, I bet you could find all that kind of stuff. Maybe even a soft pretzel with some mustard. And probably at a very reasonable price in old Swindon. They've also got something called the Magic Roundabout in the center of town. And when I was chat GPTing what is there to see in Swindon, they said you got to check out the Magic Roundabout. And I was like, what the heck is that? But it's a giant traffic roundabout that's comprised of 5 smaller roundabouts around the outside of it. I'll show it to you at the end. It's crazy. I have an anxiety attack at regular roundabouts. I can't even imagine trying to navigate that thing. So there's like the center, I guess, hub of it, and then like a pentagon. And the corners of the pentagon are where the other 5 roundabouts are. And when I was looking on the satellite map, I was like, I don't even know how you would begin to navigate something like that. It was crazy. So just on the other side of town, and I think it is lit. This might be it right here. There's a big airfield right down there. And that is the home of Lynham, RAF Lynham. I'm sure you'll be amazed to hear that that one was also opened up for use in World War II, but it would go on to become the primary base for RAF transport planes, namely the C-130 Hercules fleet. They were flying a lot of them out of there, but they closed it down in 2012, and they're now using the facility to train British Army engineers. They call it an MOD building, which I think stands for Ministry of Defense out here. But one very cool note about Lynham is that while it was in use, it was where they would fly in all the bodies of soldiers that were killed in Iraq and Afghanistan during those conflicts. And as they transported the bodies from the airport, they would drive through the little town of Royal Wootton Bassett, just to the northeast. And I guess someone would notify the townsfolk that they were driving somebody through there, and they'd all come out and line the streets to pay tribute as everybody drove by, which is absolutely awesome. Man, I almost get choked up just talking about that. When the governor of Florida died, Lawton Chiles, I was in college at Florida State. I think he died on his treadmill or something. But that's the only time I really got to see like a motorcade, a funeral motorcade come by of a statesperson. And it was moving. I actually sobered up enough just to walk down the street and see it come by. Okay, we got to start our descent, so I'm going to go, once we get over this next NDB, so we'll set it for 3,000 feet as our target, and just be ready for that. And then we'll pull our map back over and look at what that new heading needs to be, which we're really just going to have to kind of eyeball. All right, once we're there, so we're coming right over Swindon now, so we still got a couple miles to go. What is that, probably like 6 miles or so? 8 miles. And then we're going to go to 246. And then once we start our descent, we'll tune into that next NDB over there. 246, 246. I'm having a real hard time remembering that. Why don't you guys remind me? So we're waiting for that needle to flip around. While we're doing that, let's go to our best view of all. Amazing. Just amazing. I don't know if you caught it when we were outside the plane, but you could even see like the exhaust marks underneath it, right by the exhaust pipes. Really cool. Nice touch. Oh, and you can't see it now, but when the sun was up a little bit more, there's a line going from here to here. That is our antenna for the ADF. So once I land, I can hang my sweaty shirts on that, let them dry out for a little while. You guys remember our next heading? I already forgot it. It is 246. 246. Just go up by twos. 246. All right, so we'll dial that in, then we'll start our descent, and then we'll program in the frequency for that final NDB and start looking for Bristol. I'll tell you about Bath, which we're also going to be flying by. Okay, it looks like we got a little deflection, so here at the very last minute, let's try to get that right in front of us. So just like flying with a VOR, if the needle's pointing off to the left and you want to turn into it, just turn the nose of the plane into where the needle is. So if the needle's pointing off to the left, turn to the left a little bit. If it's off to the right, turn off to the right a little bit. And same thing if you're flying away, just turn it into the back of the needle if you're flying away from an NDB. 246, 246. Okay, I think I got it. We can see the water over there, and Bristol's going to be right along the water, so hopefully we'll have enough visual cues to get us into the airport. I'm going to go ahead and start our descent now, because we may not make it in time. We've only got about 17 miles to get down. So we'll do that. We'll come down at 1,000 feet a minute. Just make sure we're down in time. And pull that power back. So I think this thing cruises at around 200 knots. So we don't want to get over that. Pull our RPMs back a little bit. Love that sound. Okay, while we're waiting for our needle to flip, our announcements real quick. I have got a flight plan recommendation over Rio, and we probably need to check that out anyway since it's finally been modified. And I know we've actually got quite a few Brazilian viewers. I don't know if you guys, if you have a YouTube channel, you know, but you can go in there and see where people are watching from. And if you're curious, about 60% are in the US. I figured the number would be even higher than that. The next big clump is from the UK, then Australia, and we have quite a few Germans, and even a handful of Russians, which I thought was pretty interesting. Some Koreans. Of course, they, you know, turn the closed captioning in their local language. I can tell when they're switching the closed captioning too, which is pretty cool. And for now, we're still at like 99.9% males. So we need to get some femmes in here to boost our female stats. Share the love. That thing has got to be flipping any second now. Come on. Surely that's not Swindon in front of us. No, Swindon's on the other side. All right, I don't want to look away because I don't want to miss it. It's pretty important that we hit that. So this might be Bath right down in here because the River Avon probably, this is probably it right here. That runs just to the south of Bristol. That's probably it right over there, and then the runway is going to be right on the other side of that. So this is probably, but then Bath is like right, it's much closer to Bristol. I don't think that's it. Okay, our needle's moving. 246 will be our next heading. We'll wait till it's right behind us. And we're obviously flying a little bit to the north of it because it's not flipping. Well, that's pretty quick. And around behind us it goes, 246. Come on, straighten up, right behind us there. I feel pretty good about this descent rate. I'm going to slow her down a little bit more because I don't want to have to pitch way down once we get closer. Bring the RPMs down a little bit more. So to the extent that we can see any of Bath, it'll be off our nose to the left. It's a town perhaps most well known for its Roman history, most notably the Baths. And I was kind of curious, I don't know the answer to this, if you're from Bath or know the answer, what is the origin of the name Bath? Because I think the Romans called it the Thermae, which might have just been like the warm springs that were coming up in there. I don't know. But I'm curious about the origin of the name Bath. I'm guessing that bathtub origin is Bath, which is probably from the city. But I am very curious about that. All right, so we're coming under 7,000 now. We got to slow down even more. I'm going to pitch her down even a little bit more. We'll come down at 1,300 feet a minute, just watching that airspeed. But there's so much history in that town, the town of Bath, that the whole place has been designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site. They've also got a very old abbey down there that was established in the 600s. And if you're visiting, you can check out some incredible views of the town from their bell tower. And I know that because I saw someone do it on one of my favorite YouTube travel channels. If you want to check it out, I think it's called Memory Makers, or Memory Seekers. But it's these two guys that travel mostly around the UK, but they do a really nice job with the narration. Very historical. The video editing is very good, very high quality. I like it quite a bit. So I think this is probably Bath right down here. And we might even be able to see the big crescent, which is a bunch of upscale townhomes in a very old building. It's kind of their landmark. Time Team was out there too, as a matter of fact. Doing a little digging around. Jane Austen lived in Bath for a little while, from 1801 to 1806, which is just long enough to make some money off that fact for all of eternity. Which I'm sure they're doing. They probably have a little Jane Austen museum down there. And Uranus was spotted for the first time at Bath. Considering the history of public nudity, I'm sure plenty of other anuses were seen well before that. But the one in the sky was identified in 1781 by William Herschel from his observatory down there. I think he was originally a German guy, but moved out here when he was pretty young. Is that an airport down there? Nope. Just a long string of lights. Come on, we need to come down some more. We're targeting 3,000. There's an airport right in front of us. Look at that. No lights on that one. I'm kind of just looking to see. That's probably the runway right over there. So I kind of like this heading here. So let's get dialed into that final NDB frequency, and I'm going to try to do a little math trick here. So what is that going to be? Let's zoom way in. 414. All right. I'm going to try a little. We'll see if we can do some geometry here. 414. I'm sure we'll be able to pick that one up by now. Okay, so when this becomes 20 degrees off, because our new heading is going to be 266, so when that's 20 degrees off, which would be about right there, I'm going to make that turn and see if that'll actually line us up on the runway. That's what I was trying to do last time, but I got some I got off somehow with my orientation, so we're going to try that this time. And because I'm having to watch that so closely, I don't know if I'll be able to glance at my notes for Bristol, but I can probably remember most of it because I just typed it a few hours ago. But that's the home of the famous street artist Banksy, and he's got a couple of pieces of work down there by the center of town that you can go check out if you want to. All right, coming up on 3,000. Once we level out, we'll get the gears out. Is my math going to work? I want to keep eyes on that runway just in case it doesn't. And here we go at 3,000. Should be leveling out here. And right down in the center of town, they have the SS Great Britain, which was the largest steamer in the world when it was built and the first iron steamer to cross the Atlantic, which it did in just 14 days in 1845, I believe. And when you look at that thing on the map, I'll show it to you, you're going to wonder how the heck they got that from the ocean into the center of town. Because if you look at the River Avon, the water's kind of deep in the center of town. It's all blocked up by a bunch of locks, but the River Avon looks like it's totally dried up. And I was like, how the heck did they get that thing up there? But then I remembered our trip to southern Wales. All right, let's go full props, full mix. Landing lights back on. They have some of the biggest tidal ranges in the world out here, so I'm sure it fills way up when that tide comes in. The satellite image must have just been when it wasn't quite as high, or not high at all. And our destination is the Bristol Airport. That opened in 1927 as Whitechurch Airport. And despite having just one relatively short runway at just over 6,000 feet, it's the main hub for Southwest England. I read they get about 8 million passengers down here each year, which is nothing compared to Heathrow. I think they get around 80 million to Heathrow. But there aren't a lot of other big airports out here. Can we see the channel from down there? Not really. We're a little bit too low. Well, I've kind of lost sight of the runway, so I hope this works with this turn. If not, we'll just fly past it, eyeball it, and come in from the other direction because I set it so there's about a 5-knot direct crosswind so we could come in from either way. And that's getting kind of close to 20-degree deflection up there. Got about 8 more degrees to go. Then we'll turn to 266. Man, if I pull this off... Oh, that's got to be it right there. Yeah, that's got to be it. All right, well, let's just come this way because that's not going to work. If that's not, that's where we're landing anyway. Looks like a runway to me. We're a vintage plane. What do you expect? Give us a break. Yeah, that's got to be it. For sure. Okay, I think we're going to make it. Runway in sight. Fantastic. Very nice. I got an update, by the way, and if you're curious about my 5090, which I talk about almost every video, so you know how much I'm thinking about it, I finally got an update from Digital Storm. I hadn't heard anything since I bought it about a month ago. And as you can imagine, it was not cheap. Let's just try to get roughly on a runway heading here, and I'll take it off autopilot. They said they still don't have the parts. It's fully built other than the graphics card. So who knows how long that'll be. They're saying probably sometime in May. But everything's working good enough for now, so we'll just roll with it. Okay, our runway heading is 266. We're at 250 now. That's pretty close. So we'll start a gentle descent. Actually, I think I'm just going to hand fly it in. Okay, let's start slowing her down. Autopilot off. Not sure what gear speed is, but I don't think it's 180. Bring that nose up. I'm sure we can probably get one notch of flaps out, so let's do that. That'll slow us down a bit, and I can see the pappy, so that'll be very helpful. How beautiful is this, guys? What a great flight. I wish we could have seen more lights, but at least we were able to see more of the stuff in downtown London. That was pretty cool. Pretty cool. And we managed to arrive almost safely. We're not down yet. Doing ADF navigation. Very neat. So we'll have that Rio flight, and if that is... I haven't flown it yet, but I'm sure we can find, if we don't fly that specific route that was suggested, we'll fly something down there by Rio. That'll be our first entry into this quarter's flight plan competition. If you've got a place we got to see, we got to wait till we get at least 3 of them so we can vote at the end of the contest period. I'll load them up on our community page, and then we'll vote as a sim community. The winner will get at least $75 to the sim vendor of your choice. Spend it however you want. I'm sure you got something on your mind that you'd like to check out. I'll pay for it. But we got to get some suggestions. We got to wait till we get at least 3 of them. So we'll go ahead and start the timer as soon as I post that first flight and just run it out 3 months from there, since that's the first recommendations we got. Okay, so it looks like we're a little bit high with those pappies. Keep cutting that power back. We're coming in pretty quick. Get another notch of flaps in. I don't know where the taxiways are here. I know they've got at least 2 of them. I can remember from my test flight. So we'll just pull off the runway, and then I'll show you a close-up view of the little nav map. Of course, you want to see how we actually tracked. We'll turn the trail on. And then I'll show you a couple spots like the Magic Roundabout. We'll see if we can spot the Richard Montgomery poking up out of the water by Old Sheppy. And then I'll show you the Uffington Whitehorse. So if you do fly up over Oxford, I don't know if you were around early enough to see that flight. Despite how good the photogrammetry is now in London, you know, they cleaned that up. It used to be pretty bad. So this was probably back in 2022 when we took that first flight. I recall it didn't look real great in Oxford. But Blenheim Palace is just a little bit northwest of that. That looked pretty cool. And then we flew up to a big airbase even north of that for that trip. I'm going to give it enough power to get to about 500 feet per minute descent. That should keep us with our pappies there with 2 and 2. I don't want to get too low. Or too slow. Man, it's just so... I fly big planes so rarely. This sluggish response seems so foreign to me. Used to pretty quick feedback. But this is nice. So we didn't leave too far from here when we took that Southern Wales tour. And man, was that a huge improvement when they did that area up for that world update. Just beautiful. We finally got to see all the castles down there. Fantastic. We're a little bit high, but that's fine because this runway will be plenty long enough for this. All right, let me see if I can keep from wobbling all over the place like I did last time. And I always hit the ground a lot sooner than I think I'm going to with this because I'm used to landing planes that are like 2 feet off the ground. So we'll start that flare a bit sooner. Try to keep her lined up pretty straight. All right, all right. Oh, no, you don't. No, you don't. There we go. There we go. Stay there. No. There we go. Man, you start to give it some... I'm going to try a little braking, differential braking. God, just slow down, baby. Slow down. Let's get the flaps up. And there's our taxiway. Oh, I'm getting sick. The passengers are probably just chain smoking back there. All right, I want to hit this taxiway. Well, technically, we stayed on the runway for that landing. So, I give that like a 10 out of 10. Perfect. All right, give it a little bit of throttle. Coming over here just to get off a little bit further off the runway in case anyone's coming in behind us. Of course, now we're on the grass. There we go. Come on around. Oh gosh, we hit something. Probably those lights. Okay, well, that was a total mess. All right, now we're down to like a 9.5 out of 10. Okay, so let's just kill the mix. And bring the props back. Kill the mags. That's quiet. Ooh, I was talking awfully loud there. There we go, that's much better. All right, a couple things to look at here. First, the big reveal. Let's see how we did. Let's zoom out. All right, get the whole plane in there, and then... All right, how do I turn the tail on? Wow, that was pretty dang close. Last time I was way off. Look at that, we tracked it perfectly. Holy smokes. Okay, so my last flight, it looked more like this until we got to that first NDB signal that we could fly towards. So once I dialed that in, of course, we could go right towards it. Man, totally nailed that. And with this one, we were able to pick up that next one. So we had some deviation here because we couldn't pick up this signal until probably... No, we just turned here, so we didn't turn too much. So we nailed that, man. Nailed it. That's about what I expected. So I don't know if you guys know how you would go about doing that to find out when to turn for that. I'm sure there's some sort of geometric way you could do that. I just don't know what it is. Okay, let's get our bookmarks back on here and get rid of the tail so that we can see down here better. So if you are just cluttered up with bookmarks, of course the bookmark file will be included in the video description as usual. And there's some spots like London where there's so many of them that you might want to turn them off. So you just go up here to view and then down to user points. And then here's where you can click that. So watch when I turn them on. Look at that. These are all the spots we've flown out here. That is just so awesome. Okay, so a couple of things I want to show you. Namely, the first one. Let's see if we can spot the old Richard Montgomery first. So the guys that were filming that were right down here. I could tell because I could see the stuff behind them. Well, they said they were... that's tough. Is that it right there? I don't know. You could see the tops of that thing sticking up. I have no idea where it is. I thought it was somewhere around here, but look at this. Here's that old fort that's down here, but look at the area that it's in. I don't even know if you could go and visit that thing. It looks like it's probably in some sort of industrial complex. But pretty cool. Maybe you could sneak on there. It looked like it was covered in graffiti too, which is too bad. And here's Hellhole Island. Nope, that's Hellhole Island. That's it. It's Sheppy right there. I wanted to show you where the little museum is. There it is. There's a museum they built. Not real big, but it looks like they probably have some cool planes in there. I saw some pictures of it. Pretty neat. Well, that does look a little run down, doesn't it? And there's not a lot of residential stuff out here except right down there by the water. And I think that bridge is the only way off and on it too. Yeah, it is. Look at that. Okay, enough of that. Is that another fort? Nope, it's a sewage treatment plant. Perfect. All right, so the next thing is going to be the Uffington White Horse. Here he is right down here. And there's even an old Iron Age hill fort up here. There's nothing left of it, but this is where the remains are, the archaeological remains just under the ground of where the hill fort was. And then there's the horse, or dragon. I mean, I guess I could see why they might think it's a dragon. So if you're going to fly and check this thing out, the way that I would do it is there's a couple of fields that you can kind of use if you're looking at a satellite map to navigate your way over here, but you won't see it until you come around this side of it, assuming you're sitting on the left side of the plane or in like a cub or something where you're sitting right in the center of it. You won't see it at all till you come around the other side of it, but once you do, you'll definitely see it, which is really cool. The next thing I want to show you is the Magic Roundabout. Check this thing out. It's a little bit blurry in this one. You can see it really well in the Google Maps and on a Bing map. So here it is. So this whole thing is the roundabout, and then each of these 5 things are additional roundabouts. How the heck can you figure out what to do in something like that? That is crazy. And why would you need the additional roundabouts? It's not like anyone's coming into the middle of this thing. Probably just another tourist trap. I wonder where the big outlet malls are. Probably right downtown. And then the last thing I want to show you is the SS Great Britain. Look at this. So there she is. She's up out of the water. And you go, oh yeah, that's plenty of room. You could get down to the River Avon, no problem. But check this out. Look at that. Yeah, you're not driving it down there. But again, you can see how high that tide probably comes once it comes on in. I think it's like a 20 to 25 foot tidal range out here. It's massive. So very cool. We did it, guys. NDB ADF navigation. That's how the best I could figure out how to do it. And again, if you have resources, I'm not a real pilot, of course, so I've never done it before, but even watching guys on YouTube that are real pilots, a lot of variance in how they said to do it. Again, flying towards them, no problem. Flying away from them, that's where the magic happens. So if you have some ideas about how it could get even more accurate, but I'm not complaining after this flight. Man, that was really, really good. I'm all ears. Let me know. So next flight will probably be Clifford's Norway pack. We'll check it out. We'll do the giveaway. I've got to figure out how I'm going to do that. So let me know if you have any ideas down in the comment section. Join our Discord server if you want to hang out with a lot of really cool guys and get updates on our suggested flights, upcoming flights, complaining about the sim, which is one of our favorite topics. It's great. That link will be in the video description as well. Learned all kinds of amazing things. Flew an amazing plane. Got to do some vintage navigation. Just loved every second of it. Can't wait to see you all again in the skies. Later.